Everyone, thank you for joining us today. I'm Mickey Feldman-Simon. I'm the founder of I'm Back at Work, and I'm excited to have you here today, as well as Patricia Sinacole. And before we start with the actual webinar, I want to make sure that you can navigate and use the GoToWebinar control panel. So Patricia, if we can move to the next slide, please. And in front of you, you may have the webinar panel looking at either like the image on the right where it's all closed up, or the image on the left where it is expanded. It may also currently be obstructing the view of the PowerPoint. So first, to open and close it, you click on the orange arrow up the top, and that will open or close the webinar panel. Now, if you want to move it and drag it out of the way, you click on the top of the webinar panel, and then you just drag it to the side so it's not obstructing the PowerPoint. Now, we are going to have a 5-minute Q&A section at the end of the webinar. And to ask questions, just click on the gray questions bar and then type in your questions in the blue rectangle right and underneath. And we will address all of your questions at the end of the webinar. And now, before we get started, I'm going to turn the video camera off so you can concentrate on the PowerPoint and the presentation. And I'm going to pass it on to Patricia. Thank you, Patricia.
Happy to be here. Let me give you a quick overview of who I am, and that will, I think, give you some background on why Mickey and I are collaborating on this webinar today. I have 20 plus years of experience in the human resources world. I have an undergrad from UMass Amherst, and then I did an MBA at Babson. I also do a weekly blog post for Boston.com, and then sometimes my blog post the content is used for a column called the Job Doc column, which is usually in the business and careers section of the Sunday Boston Globe. I also full-time am the CEO founder of First Beacon Group, and First Beacon Group is an HR consulting firm. So we work with a wide range of clients, and we do lots of different HR projects and services for our clients, and about half of our revenue comes from placement. So I often speak and conduct webinars and workshops on job hunting and what I see as being successful and unsuccessful. So that's really, our goal today is to talk about sort of the job hunt. Let me move on. So 3 or 4 agenda items here. I think my strength and what I know about job hunting is I know how candidates land jobs. I know what to spend time on and what not to spend time on, which the latter half of that agenda item might be even more important than the first half. What social media can be helpful when you're looking for a job, and also the misuse of social media, because social media can help us with job leads and uncovering new opportunities and maybe companies that are hiring, but it also can hinder our job search as well, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then the 4th agenda item is what I see as the best defense against unemployment. So one of the key tools for a successful job hunt, and this sort of gets back to one of those agenda items, is LinkedIn. LinkedIn has really taken the job hunting world by storm. I always recommend that candidates get onto LinkedIn, be active on LinkedIn, complete a profile, make it a robust profile. Don't make it a skeleton profile. If you look at some profiles on LinkedIn, they basically have very limited information, and I'll tell you why that's not helpful. Make sure you have a nice photo on there. If you can afford a professional photo is a great investment for your LinkedIn profile. If not, I always say you can take out an iPhone or a smartphone and against a simple background, take 10 or 12 photographs, and you can certainly have a professional photo up by 5 o'clock today. So it's not necessarily hiring a professional photographer, but with today's technology, you can certainly get a decent photo profile pretty quickly. Get active on LinkedIn. So sharing information that you might find on LinkedIn that your contacts are sharing. If you're following a company, if you're targeting 10 or 12 companies as part of your search, you can certainly follow those companies on LinkedIn. If there are people in your professional circles that are influencers, or this morning I was looking at someone's profile and they're following Adam Grant, who's someone that I follow, that he's a social scientist at University of Pennsylvania and does a lot of writings about the workplace. Groups are an important part of LinkedIn. You can join up to 50 groups on LinkedIn. When you join a group, think about that group before you join it. It might be a group that is within your industry. So for example, using myself as an example, I belong to a lot of the HR groups. I also belong to a lot of the alumni groups for both UMass Amherst and then Babson. I also belong to a lot of the networking groups. If we're looking for digital marketers, I might join a digital marketing group, and I'll tell you why that's important. So how we search for candidates on LinkedIn is, first of all, we buy what we call a recruiter's desk on LinkedIn. So we pay LinkedIn a fee to have access to LinkedIn profiles. And how we search for candidates on LinkedIn is we'll typically do a keyword search, and we'll typically search a certain geographic area. So we might search within 10 miles of Cambridge, or 20 miles of Hartford, or 15 miles of New York City. We could do a zip code search with specific keywords, or if a client really likes, they really want an MIT grad, we are able to narrow it down to a school. So you want to make sure that you're being seen when we do a keyword search. So in your profile, if there are anywhere from 3 to 10 keywords that would describe your work experience and your professional career and your work history, make sure that those words are repeated several times in your keywords. Sometimes they might come up under a group that you join. So it might be, if you're an electrical engineer, maybe you're a member of an electrical engineering professional association. And or maybe that you have the term electrical engineer 4 or 5 times in your profile. Maybe it's in your job title, maybe it's in your summary, maybe it's in a meetup group that you're part of. So you want to make sure that those keywords are really embedded in your LinkedIn profile, because again, we'll typically, right now, we have a VP of Finance role available in Cambridge, and we're constantly combing LinkedIn and putting in keywords that might say finance, it might say venture backed, it might say startup, it might, there's probably 6 or 8 keywords that we're using within 15 to 20 miles of Cambridge. And again, the candidates that rise to the top of those searches aren't necessarily the most qualified candidates, but they're the candidates with the best profile that matches our search. So we'd like to see strong candidates at the top, but it's only really the candidates who have spent some time on a LinkedIn profile. The other tool that we use less so, but job seekers tell us all the time that they find out about good opportunities using Twitter. I encourage you to follow me if you're an active Twitter user, or search for others. The reason I put both of these on the same slide is LinkedIn does have this, wonderful capability of, when we post a job on LinkedIn, which means our client is paying us to post, and it depends on the level of job, but usually it's about $400 to post in the greater Boston area. If our client is asking us to post something on LinkedIn, there's this tiny little box. All we have to do is check it, and it goes right to my Twitter feed. So people that follow me on Twitter see exactly what we're posting on LinkedIn. So those are sort of two social media tools that I think are good tools to think about if you're launching a job search. The other ways that you can find out about leads are, job boards, in addition to LinkedIn. Two of my favorite job boards that I suggest that candidates check out. One of them is, well, actually three of them. I talked about this job board this morning, the third one. So the first one is one that Mass Medical Device Association of Massachusetts sponsors. They have a full-time person that does nothing but manage this job board. If you Google Mass Medic, I think the URL is massmedic.com, but if you Google the Mass Medical Device Association of Massachusetts, it does come up. The reason why I like that job board is someone's constantly refreshing it. They're pulling down old stale postings. They're putting up new ones. Most of the medical device companies in Massachusetts and even New England are members of that organization. They charge their members next to nothing. I think it's $25 to post on that job board. And when you think of it, that most of the organizations that are member organizations would rather post to that job board because it's a sort of a very specialized skill set where they're hoping for people with that industry experience. The other one I like is the one that is on the Mass Biotech website. And again, if you Google Mass Biotech, that will come up. It doesn't tend to have as many as the Mass Medic site does, but there's definitely people that are landing jobs through that. For HR roles, NERA, which is the Northeast Human Resources Association, they're in Concord. The last time I checked, they had over 50 jobs posted, mostly New England specific. There might be some, New York and Mid-Atlantic, but that's a great one too. And again, they're taking sort of down the jobs that have been filled, and constantly sort of keeping them, fresh and up to date. The other way to learn about new opportunities is Meetup. And meetup.com is a way to connect. It's a portal that connects people with common interests. There are some great meetup groups for job seekers. There's one that meets on a weekly, I think it's still a weekly basis in Cambridge. And people are swapping opportunities and swapping business cards and learning about companies who are hiring and who's not. So that's a great group to consider. Alumni associations, I always say you don't have to be 24 years old to go back to your alumni association and get some information on opportunities. We have a couple of rules posted with alumni associations. We have one at Framingham State University right now. We have one at MIT. So we choose different alumni associations based on the role, but they're certainly worthy of checking out for opportunities. Professional associations, NERA for HR. There's also several professional associations for finance folks. And really, if you're in the Boston area, there's professional associations for engineering folks, for marketing folks, and they always have jobs posted, typically for within that profession. And then, search firms and placement agencies, I always recommend to talk to people in your industry because there's certainly search firms and placement agencies that specialize within your industry. Let me talk a little bit about resumes, because resumes are still the tool that tends to start the interest process and start the interview process. And clients still want them, even though they might see someone on LinkedIn and a LinkedIn profile might be helpful. They still want to see, can someone sort of craft a resume and not make spelling errors and present themselves in a positive way. So again, I always recommend that you take a peek at your resume and make sure that there's some good keywords on that resume. Larger companies like the Staples of the world and the State Streets and the Bose and the Raytheon, they're not looking at your individual resume. They have what is called an applicant tracking system, or an ATS, where those resumes are being scanned in, and then hiring managers, HR folks, recruiters are oftentimes using, a keyword search to look at all the resumes that have been scanned. So again, keywords are sort of coming back again. They're important in your LinkedIn profile. They're also important in your resume, especially with some of these larger companies. In terms of, 15, 20 years ago, I think everyone had an objective at the top of their resume. I actually recommend a summary. Again, it's another place to insert some of those keywords. It is also a place to really grab the reader's attention, because when we look at metrics around what gets looked at and what doesn't get looked at in terms of a resume, some of the data suggests that the reader looks at the top third of your resume more closely than the other sections of your resume. So you want to grab someone with a summary pretty quickly. In terms of metrics, especially if you're in a sales position or a digital position or an analytics position, you want to include metrics. You want to explain, if you hit your quota, if you didn't hit your quota, if you're in a SEO or SEM role, what type of traffic that you drove to, back to your client or your company. So metrics are important. You want to make sure that your resume has a crisp look and feel, that it's not written in a, it's not written in a 6-point font, that it's not using a font that has a lot of sort of detail, what I call sort of wedding invitation detail. It shouldn't be a lot of curly cues. It should be sort of a crisp professional font and a crisp look and feel. Make sure it's error-free. Have someone else look at it. Oftentimes, spell check doesn't catch everything. I still see resumes with the word manger on it versus manager. That's my best example of something that slips through spell check. So it's a good idea to have someone else take a peek at it. Oftentimes, we're so close to a document, we can't see our own mistakes. So have someone else take a look at it. I always recommend adding a title with your own name rather than that generic title of new resume or resume 2018. For me to find you, it is easier in our database if someone has a name on it. I always recommend, saving it as a PDF and sending it as a PDF, but having it available in a doc. The reason why I like a PDF is because oftentimes someone will send me a resume, and if it's in a WordPerfect or an earlier stage of, an earlier version of Microsoft Works or Word, it comes to me, and when I open it, it doesn't look exactly like the document that they sent. So the PDF sort of freezes that. So the formatting doesn't look squirrely or misaligned. I often say, but have the doc version available, because you might need to, change the order of your skills or add a little bit more detail to the first role you've had. So you want to be able to sort of tailor it a little bit to that to the role that you're sending a resume to. All right, so networking, even though we've talked a little bit about social media and LinkedIn and Twitter, networking is certainly still the way that people get jobs. I always recommend that you're ready to go with a 2-minute elevator speech or a pitch that talks a little bit about your background and a little bit about what you're doing, what you're looking to do next. So if you did run into someone at Starbucks or the dry cleaners or CVS, you are ready to go. You have a good summary of your work history and also what you're looking for in the future and how they could be helpful. I always recommend, a business or a calling card. If you've ever been to some of these networking events and everyone comes in and they have a a nice professional business card, you sort of feel a little bit at a disadvantage because everyone else is sort of swapping business cards and you're the only one that doesn't have a business card. And we always have those people that come into these networking events that borrow a few cards and then write their name on the back of it. And I always suggest, go to Staples, go to Copy Cup, go to a local printing store and have 50 business cards made up. I always recommend adding your LinkedIn URL to your business card. If you have never customized your LinkedIn URL, it can be done in less than 5 minutes. You can put into Google customizing my LinkedIn URL, or there's also a quick tutorial on LinkedIn. And instead of being assigned sort of a mess of letters and numbers and sort of a set of hieroglyphics, you can customize your LinkedIn URL. You have to make sure that someone else doesn't have that exact same name. If your name is Michael Smith, there might be a couple of other Michael Smiths out there, so you'll have to add something distinctive like a middle initial or a MBA or something like that at the end. But it's certainly worth the 5 minutes of doing. So networking, again, this is also, somewhat of a shock to a lot of job seekers. According to the research on job hunting, 150 meets yields 1 offer. That's a lot of Starbucks, that's a lot of Panera, that's a lot of Dunkin' Donuts. But if you're really job hunting, and you really have time to go out and meet people, that's the way that people get jobs. And referrals and sort of word of mouth are key. Oftentimes it's not just the person that you're meeting with, but it's their entire network. I always recommend never saying no to an introduction. And the reason why is because it might be that person's brother-in-law, it might be that person's neighbor, it might be that person's former colleague or college roommate. So be open to introductions that might not be your first choice introductions, but they might be a source of job leads and opportunities or information about companies that are hiring. I think it's important to be gracious and thank those that spend time with you. As an example, jot a quick thank you note down if someone spent an hour with you this morning at Panera. If you're meeting someone for a cup of coffee at Panera or a Starbucks, I would suggest offering to buy them the cup of coffee. And I think people remember that. And I think it's sort of being seen as a person that really sort of practices professional etiquette. So in terms of how to approach a job search, I really view a job search as a campaign that has to have a strategy and has to have a plan. Hopefully that slide I showed before shows you that, 150 in-person meets, that's a lot of meets. So if you can go to a networking event where you can get in front of 10 or 15 professional contacts at once, that is certainly helpful. And not that you should not, I'm not recommending that you do all sort of group events, because I think one-on-one, coffees or breakfasts are important. But it really is an investment of your time. Leading with your strengths is important, and minimizing your weaknesses. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses. So rather than sort of starting out with, I'm not willing to go to Boston and I need something that works for this schedule, you want to say sort of what you are willing to do. I'm really looking in the 128 area. Ideally, I'd like some flexibility, but rather than putting up roadblocks, I think you want to lead with your strengths and minimize some of your weaknesses or those obstacles. Let's talk about positivity. So oftentimes, if I sit down with a candidate, it might be a friend, it might be a neighbor, it might be a former, college connection. And if I sit down with them for an hour at a local coffee shop and they spend the first 15 minutes talking about their former employer and how unhappy that they were and how they didn't give a 401k match and how they didn't offer any flexibility and how the manager was horrible and the coworkers were horrible, I often think to myself, I'm giving this person a whole hour, and for the first 15 minutes, we're going to talk about their former role and how unhappy that they were. And I just don't think that that's a great use of time. So I would avoid, bashing former coworkers, managers. I know that these workplaces exist. I'm not dismissing that they don't exist, but I'm just saying that if you have an hour with someone, you don't want to spend the first 15 minutes talking, negatively about your former work experience. And what we're seeing is that work comes in many shapes, sizes, and forms. It's not always sort of a full-time offer of employment. We're seeing a lot of our clients hire consultants, hire contractors, looking at sort of trying someone out before they in the contract industry, there's sort of this phrase of try before you buy. So they'll hire someone for 90 days and see if this might be a fit, and that gives them sort of greater confidence in moving forward with that person as a full-time employee. And I think no longer is contracting and consulting viewed as sort of subpar or less than a full-time job. I think that employers sort of get that it's a different approach to work, but it's still valid work experience. I'm going to talk a little bit about references. So I talked earlier a little bit about resumes and how they should be, crisp and professional and clean and error-free, and really sort of the best representation of your professional work history. I should have mentioned when we were talking about resumes that I always recommend going back once a year and looking at your resume and making sure that it's still up to date and accurate and refreshing it if need be. Don't wait 5 years, or don't wait when someone calls you for a job opportunity. You want to make sure that you're constantly keeping that document updated. But getting back to references, so I think it is a great idea to be prepared with 3 to 5 professional references. These aren't, your best friend or your neighbor. We want someone that has worked with you. And it should have the same look and feel as your resume. So it should be, the same font, not a font number 6, but at least 11 or 12. It should be sort of a professional display of who can speak a little bit about your professional capabilities. It is a joy when a candidate says to me, you know, I'd be happy to share, you know, my references with you if that is going to make your job easier. And then suddenly in my inbox, I see that list of references appear. Oftentimes my clients will say, hey, if you get 4 references, why don't we have your team do 2 of them and we'll do 2 of them. So sometimes they are passed on to a client. So I think how they're presented is important. I also recommend that you put their name, their cell phone, identify whether it's home, cell, or work, their email address, and also how you knew them. Don't make us try to figure that out. It might say, you know, former supervisor at State Street Bank. It might say, coworker while at Biogen. So let us know the context. So when we're making that call, we can say that, you know, Jane Smith said that you were a former supervisor of hers at State Street. I also recommend prepping a resume before they even get our call. We talk to references all the time, and they'll often sort of go down this path that we don't expect them to go down. So they'll often talk about how they just connected with you and they just had lunch with you at Alta Strata and they had a great meal and it was so great to connect with you, and you've had two children, and you know, now the kids are older, and really that's not what we're interested in hearing about. I mean, it's interesting, but really it's not relevant. So I always try to recommend that a candidate preps their references before they get a call from us. So you might want to email that reference and say, hey, you might be expecting a call from Patty Sinacole. She said she'd call late next week. Can you make sure that you highlight these 3 to 5 things about my background? Because you know, at that point, if you're a final candidate, you know the job pretty well, and you know your work experience and what this reference can comment about. So you want to sort of prep them for that call so they focus on exactly what you want them to focus on. The 30, 60, 90-day plan. This is something that we suggest that final candidates invest some time in. Mickey is going to have a sample that's available. Mickey, maybe you can talk about that toward the end of the webinar. A 30, 60, 90-day plan, we have found candidates very successfully using a 30, 60, 90-day plan. I'll tell you what it is, and I'll tell you when we suggest that you use it. When you are a finalist for a role, and not when you've just applied, not when you're one of 20 or one of 50 candidates, but when someone that represents that employer, whether it's a headhunter, whether it's a recruiter, whether it's the hiring manager, someone indicates to you that you're a final candidate. So it might be something like, hey, we're bringing our 2 final candidates in next Friday. At that point, I want you to think about this 30, 60, 90-day plan. And what this is a 1 to 2 page action plan that if you were hired by this company, how you would have an impact in the first 90 days. And oftentimes we'll get the question of, how will I know what goes on there? Hopefully, as part of the selection process and as part of your interview, you have asked the question, what are the expectations for the first 90 days? Where do you sort of expect me to have the most impact? And so really that's a question that's providing content for this 30, 60, 90-day plan. You'll see when Mickey provides a copy, that it's not War and Peace. It's not 75 pages long. It's not an extremely dense document. It's really sort of an outline of what you hope to achieve in the first 90 days. And how that differentiates you is, first of all, it makes you memorable because your competition probably is not doing this. So memorable in a positive way. And second of all, it says that you're serious. It says that you really want this job, that you've given it some thought. And these 30, 60, 90-day plans take some time. They don't take half a day, but they certainly take an hour or so to develop. So you don't want to do it for every job that is of interest to you, but it's really worth investing the time when someone signals to you that you're a finalist. And again, the words might be, hey, in early March, we're looking at bringing final candidates in the week of the 6th, or congratulations, you've made it to the final 2. But someone is going to indicate that you're a finalist, and you can think about using this. So what we see successful job hunters do is really never stop networking. We work with, candidates all the time, and when we see LinkedIn updates that they've joined a new firm, or they've accepted another role at another company, we know those people that are out there constantly. I mean, I have one candidate that I have placed with a company in Cambridge, and I see his LinkedIn updates, and I always send him a message through LinkedIn saying, congratulations, Tom, looks like you landed another job. Can I ask you how you got that job? And, we have probably 10 people that we've worked with in the past who say, I have never stopped networking. I mean, and some of them for good reason. They were out for 3 to 6 months. And they really feel like they've never stopped networking for a new job. It's part of who they are as a professional now. I always recommend to set goals and reevaluate them regularly. If you are seeing a lot of jobs that require a web certificate, think about setting that as a goal and having that completed by year end. And also reevaluating your goals regularly to make sure that they are still aligned with your career aspirations in that next job. I think keeping skills and knowledge current is important, especially for those who have taken a career break, whether it's for child rearing or a sick parent or to go back full-time to school. You really want to make sure that your skills are current, especially if it's in a technology field. I think mentors and advisors are important to all of us. I know that I have mentors and advisors that I go to, on a regular basis to seek out, their guidance, support, and wisdom. I think, that's important to a strong career and a strong professional network. The be positive, again, comes up. I think that, there might be at some points in your job search that you get calls about opportunities that are not a good fit for you, but you still should be gracious. Can I share my resume? Can I connect with you on LinkedIn? I think that's important. Thinking outside the box is important. So looking at opportunities maybe that you hadn't thought of before. I remember probably 10 years ago when I was resuming sort of more of a full-time schedule rather than a part-time schedule. I went back and I did some adjunct teaching, and I'm so glad that I did that. I loved every moment of it. It was something that worked with my schedule, that still maintained, kept me sort of professionally and intellectually engaged. So that's a good example of sort of thinking outside the box. Education is important. We have situations, I feel like every year, where someone has embellished a degree or represented a degree that they don't have. More and more companies are doing background checks. because you did 4 years of undergraduate coursework doesn't always mean that you earned a BA or a BS. I would encourage, if you're that close, to finish it with all the online learning opportunities that we have today. But education is important. So this is sort of that fourth agenda item where I talked about sort of the best defense against unemployment. I have found that people with candidates with strong relationships and a strong professional network that really look at establishing that network, maintaining it, nurturing it, keeping up with those relationships, very rarely have long stints of unemployment. And I think it's like watering a garden. I don't think, you do it, twice a summer and hope for it to grow. I think you have to go out and sort of nurture those plants throughout the summer. I still have a professional goal of 3 to 5 new LinkedIn contacts a week. I don't know how many LinkedIn connections I have right now, but I think it's probably over 5,000. But where we do a ton of work using LinkedIn, and we share a ton of opportunities on LinkedIn, I really feel like that LinkedIn network is sort of my network of resources. So whether I can connect someone in my LinkedIn network with a client for professional reasons, or oftentimes we'll share an opportunity. It's not even an opportunity that we're working on, but it's an opportunity that someone has shared with us and someone lands a job. I think that, that all comes back to us. I think I probably mentioned professional etiquette before, but I think if someone is meeting you at a Starbucks or a Panera, I think it's important to show up on time and be respectful of their time. If I have committed to meeting someone for an hour, I expect to, be leaving that Starbucks an hour later. I think that, offering to buy someone a cup of coffee is probably a good example of that as well. And then jotting a quick thank you note at the end. It is a small world. I'm sort of getting to the second check mark. Don't burn bridges, even if you went on an interview and it was a horrible miss and it wasn't even close to what the desired role was for you. Oftentimes a candidate will say to me, it wasn't a good match, but I loved the company. And guess what? That sort of motivates us to go back to that client and say, you know what, Jessica wasn't interested in this opportunity, but can we keep her in mind, because she's really sort of passionate about education. She's really interested in your company as a potential employer. My biggest pet peeve is this last check mark. So we often will reach out to candidates on weekends or in the evenings or really early in the morning. So I don't like calling someone at 6:15 on their cell phone. So, but I will email someone at 6:15 if I'm in the office early. So check email daily, even on the weekends if you're job hunting, if not several times a day. That's still the primary way we reach out to candidates. I know some recruiters will text. We use text as sort of a last resort, because we're just not able to track the texts as well if we go back and sort of say how many times have we reached out to this candidate. So I would recommend that folks check email daily, even on the weekends. And I guess one of my parting thoughts before I turn it over to Mickey is to, after you land in a new role, to be open to others who might need you to review a resume or might request that you meet them at 7 o'clock at a Starbucks in Waltham. So I do think sort of that give back, sort of what goes around comes around. Nikki, I think this is where I'm going to turn it over to you, and maybe you can talk a little bit about, the community that you're building.
Thank you, Patricia, for all that very valuable information. So first of all, this is a good time for you to type in any of the questions that you may have. So click on that gray questions bar and type in your questions. And while you're doing that, I want to tell you about the new I'm Back at Work members community. And basically, we listened to you, we heard from you that you would like more support from us on an ongoing basis. And we started the I'm Back at Work community, where we have weekly sessions with Q&A, webinars. They're not recorded. You can talk about more personal things, ask questions. It's a closed Facebook group where only members see what you post, see what we post, and you can ask questions and get support from members on an ongoing basis. The idea is really to help you follow through on your job search, on your action plans, on setting goals. And also we post there different job openings from companies that are very open to taking women who have been out of the workforce and are looking to return. It's a great place to make new connections on LinkedIn, etc., and through the group. And you also receive exclusive materials to our members only, like the 30, 60, 90-day plan that Patricia was just talking about. And I can tell you that a few companies that I work with, some of them, when people definitely just bring it themselves, they get on top of the pack, on top of the line, and a lot of them require the 30, 60, 90-day plan as part of the later search and the final decisions. Basically, they want to see, okay, what did you understand? What can you bring to the table? Now, the whole mission of I'm Back at Work has been to help all women return to the workforce. And with that in mind, we know that money can be tight when you're looking for work. And the community, it is $29 for a 3-month membership. So really is, think of it as 3 Starbucks coffees or less than $10 a month. And if you want to join, just go to the I'm Back at Work website, click on the community tab, and you can join us there. And I will look forward to having you part of our Q&A session next week. And now to your questions. So Helen is asking, I'm starting a new career. I have a great LinkedIn profile for a former profession. How can I use former info for a new profile? Patricia, do you want to start answering that?
Sure. So career changing is not sort of the sort of challenge that it used to be. I would suggest putting general skills that if you're targeting a different industry, if you were a scientist and you want to go into teaching, as an example, use some of the keywords that would target your future career rather than your past career. You want to be honest and upfront about what your prior skills were. But you can certainly say in your summary that you're now targeting opportunities in education, because there are transferable skills between industries. So the other recommendation I have for sort of folks that are changing between industries is using LinkedIn to research those industries and find out if any of your professional contacts work in those industries. And I sort of have an ulterior motive with making that recommendation. Someone that worked with you in the past that can really sort of vouch for your professional capability is more willing to take a risk on you and to hire you in a new industry. So if you worked with another scientist at Biogen, and now you're really looking to teach, maybe at the undergrad level at Tufts, and you know that someone that used to work with at Biogen is now at Tufts, certainly reach out to them, find them on LinkedIn, and explain that you're exploring opportunities now in education. Because someone who has sort of traveled that path before or can speak to your professional competencies is much more willing to take a risk on someone that they know. Sort of that known skill set and known work ethic is sometimes more important than sort of the qualifications on a job description.
Right, and I couldn't agree more about the transferable skills, and I think this is where that you should put work and effort into looking at what are the required skills for the new profession and identifying those in what you have done, and then writing that into your profile in a way that if they're searching, etc., you'll come up. And one very important thing is also in your title on LinkedIn, make sure that it doesn't say software engineer or something like that. If that's what you were, you wanted to say something more general that will fit into your career, your new career as well. Akila is asking how to approach recruiters in LinkedIn. What would you say to that, Patricia?
I think that you can send them a connection. Before I send them a connection, I would look at their profile and make sure that they have some good clients or they're sort of a specialist in the industry or the segment of the workforce that you're interested in. So if you're targeting, to sort of get back to my higher ed example, if you're targeting education or higher ed, and there's one recruiter that is really focused on electrical engineers, I probably wouldn't connect with them. But if there's someone who has some good ins with higher ed clients, I think that that's valuable.
Right, and just so you know, you don't need to have the LinkedIn premium or anything like that. The best way is just to reach out and connect, and don't just click the connect button. Definitely add a little note in there on why you want to connect with them. And after you connect, you can start more of a conversation. One more question from Rachel. If you're authorized to work in the US, do you recommend adding that to your resume?
Yes. So especially right now with sort of the current climate and visas where, with the current administration, H-1Bs and different visas might be even more difficult to attain. If you're eligible to work in the United States, and there's any concern when someone looks on your resume, I recommend adding that, because right now sort of the bar has been raised in terms of sponsorship and H-1B attainment of like, for example, H-1B visas. So I would definitely add recommending that. I mean, there's also a cost to the company. So, to hire a H-1B, it's usually between the fees and the legal fees, it's somewhere between $5,000 to $7,000. So if you can explain that and say that you're legally eligible to work in the U.S., I think that's a good thing. The same sort of applies for folks that are relocating to an area. If you're relocating at your own expense, definitely make sure that you mention that. So if we have someone that's right now sitting in Burlington and they're Burlington, Massachusetts, and they're looking at opportunities in Atlanta, you want to make sure that any employer that you're looking to work with in Atlanta knows that you're willing to relocate at your own expense.
I couldn't agree more with you, Patricia, on both of those. And I think always look at it from the company's perspective, that they're trying to reduce cost and risk. And with the visas, not only is it cost, but at the moment it really is a risk, because you just don't know if people's visas will be renewed. So if you are authorized to work in the US for any employer, put it on your resume, and definitely with moving as well. Now we have one more question. Constantina is asking, can I add in my resume and my LinkedIn profile courses that I do for professional development that are non-credit? For example, free online courses from universities, courses which of course are related to the job I'm searching.
Absolutely. If they're job related, I would definitely add them. It doesn't have to be, I mean, I wouldn't say that they're part of a degree granting program. I wouldn't say that they're continuing education credits if they're not, but it shows that you're continuing to develop your skills, and it really sort of speaks to that. I think there was one bullet or one point on the PowerPoint that talked about keeping skills current. So I think it says that you're continually sharpening your skills and making sure that you're up to date. So I would absolutely add that.
Right, and I would just have it under additional courses, something like that. Just, again, I think the point that Patricia made, don't try and make them what they're not. Just put them as they are, whatever, just as professional development even, and it just makes you look like a better candidate, somebody who's constantly learning.
And that's actually, so one of the questions that we get a lot in the job doc column is, you know, I was a history major, and do I have to go back to school if I want to be an interior designer? So sort of a complete job change. And I always say that I would not recommend going back for like a degree granting program. There's a lot of great certificate programs out there that if your undergrad is not relevant to your sort of current career interests, you can certainly go back and get a web certification or an interior design certification, or something like that, that is like a, you know, has some online learning, so you don't have to battle, you know, the Mass Pike 128, you know, traffic, but also, you know, it's much less expensive. So, you know, 6 courses versus like a you know, a degree granting program that would cost you, you know, thousands of thousands. I think some of those certificate programs are just as helpful for, you know, updating skills, especially for folks that are looking at changing careers.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Many thanks to you, Patricia. If you want to move just to the last slide, our contact details are on there. If you would like to contact Patricia or myself, if you need anything. So I see, Patricia, we don't have it updated. It's on the website. So please feel free to reach us there. And thank you, Patricia, for all that valuable information, and everybody else for joining us today.
Thank you, Mickey.
Bye.